There were 20 homeless veterans that were evicted from hotels in order to make room for these migrants. Mayor Adams also suggested that the next step in tackling the migrant crisis will be for New York residents to start taking migrants into their homes.
I'm Stephanie Keith.
And I am Tara Manjekovic, and we are unapologetically outspoken. Hey, everybody, welcome to Freedom Friday. So Stephanie and I wanted to talk a little bit about the results of all the migrant movement that has been going on throughout the country. So Title 42, we know, ended about a month ago on May 11th, and it was expected that there was going to be like this massive escalation in border crossings. But according to statistics that were released by the Department of Homeland Security this past Tuesday, they say that border crossings have actually decreased 70% since Title 42 ended. And they're claiming that Border Patrol is encountering an average of only 3,700 illegal migrants a day, or as the federal government refers to them, quote, unscheduled encounters. But unless my math is incorrect, Stephanie, that still adds up to well over 111,000 illegal migrants coming into the country every, month?
That's insane. That is a large number.
Right. And it's very clear that the migrant humanitarian crisis is still very much an issue. And there's nowhere for all of these migrants to go. And so, of course, Texas and Florida are still busing and flying migrants across the country. And all of the hypocrite sanctuary city states who wanted this open border are still continuing to lose their minds and declare states of emergency and whine about the influx of migrants in their communities. And in my opinion, the most hypocritical and fascinating thing that's going on is what's happening in New York. So several weeks ago, right after Title 42 ended, Mayor Adams declared a state of emergency in New York again, because he did that several months ago. And he recently came up with this very detailed plan to bus hundreds of adult male migrants to a quiet suburban community in Rockland County in New York. And in this process, there were 20 homeless veterans that were evicted from hotels in order to make room for these migrants. And many of them were veterans who were struggling with PTSD. And so in response, one of the Rockland County executives, Ed Day, he turned around and declared a state of emergency in Rockland County in an effort to halt this influx of migrants, and apparently made some statement like he was going to grab Adams by the throat if he tried to continue offloading more migrants to Rockland. And back on May 8th, there was a New York Post article that had given very detailed information about how this migrant busing program would involve an estimated 340 single male migrants being voluntarily bused from New York City to Rockland. And one of the locations they were going to be staying in was a place called the Armoni Inn and Suites in Orangetown. And there was this whole issue that went on with the city council, and there was a fire inspection and a building inspection and reports of code violations. And like the citizens of Rockland were very concerned. And, one of them stated, quote, "You don't know what you're getting. This is an unvetted group of men without any paperwork to their name, people with a blank slate. Everyone in this town sympathizes with these poor people, but the safety concerns are legitimate and should not be dismissed as xenophobic." And then according to another article in New York Post around the same time, the commander of the American Legion Department of New York, David Riley Sr., stated, quote, "These veterans serve their country, taking an oath to put themselves in harm's way if need be. They deserve better. We owe them. Our country, our state, our citizens owe them." And this was also echoed by Congressman Mike Lawler, who said, quote, "It is absolutely outrageous that homeless veterans would be displaced to alleviate New York City's migrant crisis. That Mayor Adams would choose to endanger the welfare of our veterans speaks volumes to what a debacle this has become."
This is it's disgusting that veterans are being kicked to the curb, but these migrants that just illegally came here are being taken care of, and all of this money is being spent on them. And I saw one couple that went on Fox News and said that they were having a wedding in that area. And the rooms for their 160 wedding guests were canceled like last minute due to migrants needing them. And it was going to cost them nearly $20,000 to find rooms last minute for their guests. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah, that's crazy. And like, I guess both of these counties were able to successfully get restraining orders to stop the migrants from coming. But there's another case going on right now with both of those counties in court as we speak. So who knows where it's actually going to end up.
Well, get this. Okay. You're never going to guess where Mayor Adams has been housing some of them. So there's like 65,000 that went through New York City so far. In 20 school gymnasiums, he was putting these single men in the schools that are in session with children. Like, how freaking crazy is that? And apparently, parents were only given 24 hours notice at some schools. So they rallied together and protested against this. One PTA co-president, Sheldon Austin, had a message for Mayor Adams saying, quote, "The fact that you did this on the weekend on Mother's Day," apparently that's when it started, "snuck everything in, tells me I can't trust you," end quote. And I guess even the students joined the protests with signs that read things like, "Mayor Adams, my school is not a hotel," and "I'm a child, don't violate my rights." And parents are obviously livid and now determining if they should even allow their kids to go to school because they're worried about their safety. One parent was saying that she'll pull her daughter out of school if it gets worse, especially if it's all men, which so far it seems to be. That's who's being housed here. And at one of the protests outside of a Brooklyn school, the New York Post reported a woman by the name of Myra Ducos saying, quote, "I say to the mayor, open up Gracie Mansion and allow the migrants to have a shower and hot meal. You have 22,000 square feet. Let them seek refuge at your home," end quote. And I don't know. I think that Myra's onto something, Taro. Why don't some of these progressive politicians that created this situation take some of the migrants onto their properties? What do you think?
Well, honestly, Stephanie, it seems like that might actually be the next step in New York, or at least a variation of that plan. Because as of this week, Mayor Adams announced that the city is going to be housing migrants in churches, and the number of migrants entering New York has now risen to over 72,000. Try coming to Texas because it's like 30 times that number. But anyway, according to an article in the American Military News, Mayor Adams held a press conference on Monday. And during that press conference, he announced he was going to create a faith-based shelter program where a nonprofit organization called New York Disaster Interfaith Services is going to help as many as 50 different churches offer overnight shelter for up to 19 single adult men at each location per night. And again, let's stress here that all of these things are single men that are being housed in all of these places. A ton of single men.
Well, and I'm sorry, but New York has had a homeless problem for a long time with American citizens and, like you said earlier, veterans. So why couldn't he come up with this faith-based shelter program when Americans were needing it?
Right. Yeah, well, it gets even better because he thinks this is such a brilliant idea because it will cost the city $125 per person a day, which apparently is far less than what it costs to house migrants in homeless shelters and hotels. And he's complaining and whining that the federal government has only given New York about $30 million in aid for the migrant crisis, which apparently only covers 5 days of migrant costs that the city is paying for. And he said that what's happening is not sustainable. In an interview with CBS New York on Tuesday, Adams stated, quote, "We can't spike the ball because buses are continuing to come to our city. This is an unsustainable problem that New Yorkers are faced with every day." And, like I just said, this situation has not been sustainable for the overrun state of Texas for several years now, nor for the rest of the country, which is why we need to have a fucking closed border like every other country in the world. But you know what? Since you choose to be a sanctuary city, then technically this crisis should be your responsibility. And during this same press conference, Mayor Adams also suggested that the next step in tackling the migrant crisis will be for New York residents to start taking migrants into their homes. So
what a joke.
Let's listen to this clip from Fox News.
Right now to the Big Apple, Mayor Eric Adams says further on down the line, he might one day call on New Yorkers to open up their homes and their businesses to migrants. Once shelters hit capacity again, he suggests paying homeowners who let migrants move into spare rooms, for example. So are taxpayers going to go for it? And voters? Let's bring in New York City Councilman Joe Borelli. Joe, the first step he seems to be taking is he's calling it a partnership with faith-based organizations. He's asking houses of worship to step in and help support migrants. What do you think? Let's start there. What do you think of that?
Well, that's somewhat bizarre to begin with. I mean, many of these institutions are doing a fine job taking New York homeless people off our streets and trying to solve some of the problems that we have. Here we have a scenario where some of these same churches would be causing a problem in exchange for a couple of dollars that they can make for stockpiling migrants in their basement. I think New Yorkers are going to get frustrated by this, and they're going to see this as a problem when these folks are occupying places really close to home.
So let's turn now to the future plan that he touched on in public comments yesterday, which is he might ask New Yorkers to actually take folks into their homes and into their businesses. This is what he said as justification for that idea. Listen.
It is my vision to take the next step to this, to go to the faith-based locales, and then move to private residence. We can take that $4.2 billion, 4.3 even maybe now, that we potentially have to spend, and we can put it back in the pockets of everyday New Yorkers, everyday houses of worship, instead of putting it in the pockets of corporations.
So a financial argument, essentially. What do you think?
Look, I don't know what more has to happen in order to prove that the train has finally went off the track on this migrant situation. I don't know what more Joe Biden needs before he acts. But now we're talking about actually putting migrants, people who have come here illegally, people who are homeless, inside of private residences. As you know, Jillian, New Yorkers live in pretty dense, high-rise apartments, many of us. And imagine your own building where you live every day being turned into a de facto homeless shelter for people who have come here illegally. That's the real proposition that New Yorkers are facing, and it is almost absurd. I would love to say it's absurd, but it's more and more becoming like it's in the realm of possibility. I don't know when enough is enough. I don't know when we can finally end this crisis. I don't know what the off ramp is. Whether it's when we hit the 100,000th person, whether it's when we hit the millionth person. I really don't know. And these are the answers that the mayor really needs to come up with very soon.
So, is that insane or what?
It's totally insane. And we've talked about this so many times, how these people that come here illegally, they are tied to the cartel. They pay off their debt by selling drugs or by doing sex trafficking. So you're going to open up your home to the cartel sex traffickers. But you know what? That's when people will actually start speaking out about it and protesting and actually demanding something change. Because right now, no one is really fighting it. I mean, people aren't in the streets protesting over this.
No, and he's playing it off like this is going to help the residents of New York who have economic challenges because they have these spare rooms and it's cheaper. And that way they can assist people. And he said, quote, the closer we bring the asylum seekers in the migrants to everyday New Yorkers, the easier it will be for them to transition into society. So my question was, okay, Mayor Adams, how many migrant families are you going to be housing in your private home? And then it turns out that apparently on Tuesday, he told reporters, quote, I don't have a problem if I can put a migrant family in Gracie Mansion because I want to lead from the front. But Stephanie, how convenient that there are possible legal restrictions against doing this since it's a government-owned property. And let's be honest here. If a migrant family was put in Gracie Mansion, that family would be vetted. It would be the picture-perfect example of this wonderful destitute migrant family that's just looking for sanctuary. is Gracie Mansion going to be taken over as a den for drugs and violence and sex like the New York City hotels that have been housing migrants? Because that's what's been taking place throughout the city of New York, where these hotels have been forced to take in migrants. And one of these hotels is called Row NYC, and it's a hotel located in the theater district that was apparently a very popular tourist hotel, but is no longer open to guests because now it has become a dedicated migrant hotel. And back on May 27th, Fox News reported that a former employee of the Row Hotel named Carlos Ariano stated, quote, "Every day we find about 10 kids alone in their hotel rooms, either drinking or doing drugs. Weapons will be in the room, but we're not allowed to go in there. We're not allowed to take anything from them. It's basically a free-for-all." Carlos also told Fox News that he and other workers experienced trashed rooms, violence in the street outside the hotel, multiple incidents involving staff, and that he and other employees felt endangered working there. So the latest move by Mayor Adams occurred just 2 days ago on Wednesday morning when he filed a lawsuit in state court against 30 upstate and Long Island counties, including both Rockland and Orange counties, which is why they're back in litigation again. But he filed this lawsuit against all these counties for issuing executive orders blocking local hotels and motels from contracting to house migrants that are being bused from New York City. And according to an article in Bloomberg, Mayor Adams made a statement saying that the lawsuit was aimed at ending, quote, xenophobic bigotry on the part of county and local officials. And Adams stated, quote, "Since the crisis began, New York City has virtually on its own stepped up to provide shelter, food, clothing, and other services to asylum seekers arriving in our city. We are doing our part, but we need every locality across the state to do their part as well." Again,
whatever.
Actual homeless people in your city, but let's put up housing for all these migrants.
Right. No, they want these policies and they cheer it on until it comes to their doorstep. And then they don't want it anymore. Right. Just like with everything else, biggest hypocrites ever. And, New York City has definitely been in the spotlight with this whole crisis. But now Gavin Newsom decided that he's going to take some of that spotlight by throwing punches at DeSantis over sending, get this, 2 planes of migrants to Sacramento. Okay. Like we're literally talking about 36 people total, and he loses it. So Gavin Newsom decides to tweet out, quote, to Ron DeSantis. He tweets, quote, "You small, pathetic man. This isn't Martha's Vineyard. Kidnapping charges, ? And then he attaches the kidnapping code. And it's so ridiculous. So Alicia Collins, who's a spokeswoman for the Florida Department of Emergency Management, said in a statement, quote, "Florida's voluntary relocation is precisely that, voluntary. Through verbal and written consent, these volunteers indicated they wanted to go to California." End quote. And she even provided a video of the migrants en route to the state, and it included videos of them signing these agreements, and they looked incredibly happy. They were like giving 2 thumbs up in front of the planes. So it's definitely not kidnapping whatsoever. And I'm going to play a clip so you can hear the response from DeSantis.
These sanctuary jurisdictions are part of the reason we have this problem, because they have endorsed and agitated for these types of open border policies. They have bragged that they are sanctuary jurisdictions. They attack the previous administration's efforts to try to have border security. And so that's the policies they've staken out. And then what? When they have to deal with some of the fruits of that, they all of a sudden become very, very upset about that. Well, what are these people having to deal with here? I don't see the sympathy for them. And so, the reality is I think the border should be closed. I don't think we should have any of this. But if there's a policy to have an open border, then I think the sanctuary jurisdiction should be the ones that have to bear that.
I think he explains it perfectly well, just like you were saying earlier, like let the sanctuary cities handle it. So anyhow, like these states and cities, again, they just tout how they're sanctuary states and they want to help people and they like brag about it, and they receive federal funding for it. They receive that for being a sanctuary city. So yeah, they should be the ones taking some of the burden off these, migrants that are filling up these other towns and states. And they're the reason, too, that people think it's perfectly okay to cross the border illegally, because they're hearing from these people how great it is and how they're provided with everything. And I completely agree that those that support the open policies and have policies on being sanctuary states should have to deal with the repercussions. Like, it shouldn't be Texas or Florida that are clearly and openly very against these policies that we have in place right now. And of course, the people that are for the absurd policies are only for them when it doesn't affect them. Like, they never want to deal with it.
The hypocrisy of, you're going to say that you're going to accuse DeSantis of kidnapping when people voluntarily get on a plane. The same people who are accusing him are the ones who are going to, like Adams, put them on buses and send them out to other cities and then sue those cities for not accepting them.
Yep. Yeah.
Like, it's like bizarro world. It makes no fucking sense.
Right. And kidnapping, are you freaking kidding me? Like, there's 85,000 children missing because of this crisis. Why isn't he talking about kidnapping there? No, it's only when it's a Republican. And not to mention, they have room for these migrants in California, because in just 1 year alone, 211,000 people left the state of California. So I think that they can handle 36 migrants. Like, give me a break. And it really isn't just Republicans that are against the open border. So RFK, who, by the way, I am liking more and more as the days go on. Like, this guy, I can't get enough of him. And he posted on Twitter that he visited the border in Yuma, Arizona. And I'm going to play the clip so you can hear what he experienced.
Last night, it was like a dystopian nightmare with, all of these desperate people flooding across the wall and in a situation that clearly could have been prevented. And people from all over the world, from Africa, from Uzbekistan, from Senegal, from Pakistan, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Nepal, Tibet, India, Bangladesh, Peru, Colombia. We saw all of these people, and these hundreds and hundreds of people coming across the wall. And it seems so hopeless. And then meeting all of the people of Yuma, the leadership, this extraordinary leadership in this amazing town, the people who run the hospitals, the people who run the border clinic, the sheriff, and all of these other people, the food banks, who are working as hard as they can to accommodate the problem that was been created by the federal government, that local people are being, forced to hold the bag on.
I think he explains it so well. Dystopian nightmare, like, perfect way to describe it. And he went on to say in that interview that the local hospital administrator there told him that the hospital has spent $23 million so far on caring for the migrants, and they have not been reimbursed by the federal government for like any of that. And he brings up like the food shelters, the police, like all of the local people that have this massive burden. And, where's the federal government that put this policy in place?
But you don't see those people getting up on TV, whining and bitching like Mayor Adams about the $5 million that it costs to house the migrants.
Exactly. Well, it's like that whole victim mentality, and that's totally what he's doing. And then the second that, these upstate New York cities fight against it, he's calling them racist. They're xenophobic. Well, RFK just said, like, he was saying, just in like the few hours that they were standing there were hundreds upon hundreds of single men coming through. They were asking all of them, where are you from? And he listed, what did he list? Like 10 different countries. I mean, everywhere. They're from all over the world. It's not like they're all coming from Venezuela and escaping. They're coming from all over the place. None of them are probably properly vetted. I mean, it's just absolutely a nightmare. And I feel like the reporting on this is getting less and less. And so most people have no idea that this is probably happening in your town. No matter where you are in the United States, I guarantee you have a migrant crisis somewhere in your town that you're completely unaware of, but that's putting a burden on the hospitals, on the shelters, on the police force, on everything.
And your tax dollars are paying for it. And like I said at the beginning of this podcast, our federal government is playing it off like it's a fucking win because we've had this drop in border crossings.
Yeah.
But it's not a win. It's not
Right.
a win.
Right. Oh, I know. I mean, when you look at the numbers of people that crossed the border during the Trump presidency, or really any presidency before Biden, I mean, we're talking like, hundreds of thousands in like a total of 4 years. And here it hasn't even been 4 years. And we're at 1.5 million. And that's just what has been encountered. I mean, who knows what else there is. So it's just completely out of control. And I don't know. It's very concerning. But like I said, I'm really liking RFK. Like every issue, like he has the perfect response. I'm like, I'm watching you. Like he's pretty good. And I'm glad he went to the border, because what other Democrat have you seen go to the border and actually try to talk to them and see for themselves what's going on? So
I mean, our own president only stopped close to the border for a couple hours one day.
right, but he made sure that all those pesky migrants were cleared
they were
out
all gone.
before.
They were all put away.
Yeah, right, exactly. But we're the ones that are xenophobic. Whatever. Okay, well, that's the update. I feel like there's going to be continuous updates on this topic, just like pretty much all the topics we talk about. So we'll keep everyone up to date on the latest. And I hope everyone has a great weekend. We'll see you back here for our Motivation Manifestation Monday. And thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you get our latest episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And if you could, please rate and review the show. We are going to be reading every single review. And I would love it if you hopped over to Instagram at Unapologetically Outspoken and say hi. We want to see who's out there and start a conversation. Plus, get all of the topics that you want us to talk about next. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.